So the person I interviewed first was Charles Miglore, and he is deceased. He died a couple of years ago. Thursday Kwan is deceased.
How many kids there found?
They must have had another generation that I was not in touch with. But Charles was among the youngest of the 13, and most of his siblings were already deceased 15 years ago. So. And Thursa Kwan was in her 90s. Miriam Stelling was in her 90s. So these people were really... Okay, so this is the pavlinas. And one of the reasons I sought out the pavlinas was because of the ownership of this particular orchard, Orchard Heritage Park. So I interviewed first Lou Pavlina, who was not that far in age from me, and he gave me family background and all of that. And then Peter Pavlina, his father. I interviewed him later, who's about the age of my parents, who he is no longer as well. This gave me, let's see, do I have another? There's Peter Pavlina there. So this gave me a little bit different perspective because the orchardists, or the farmers, I should say, had some resentment about the city annexing their land. And part of it was because they didn't want to pay taxes. They didn't want to be in a city. They didn't want the, streets coming through. And the Pavlinas and the Vidovich family, when their property had a major thoroughfare cut through, for example, Mary Avenue in the case of Pavlina, it's like what to do. There's a 60-foot passage cut through my farm, and so so these two families became real estate developers. And I want to make sure I get this right because one of them told me this, and it was an insight to me. This is Pavlina. Okay, well, the Pavlinas were cherries along with the Olsons, the Tikvikas, and this is sort of the highest end of the crop market, so the most lucrative. And part of the reason, he explained to me, it was the most lucrative is because it was the least labor intensive. So you didn't have to spray like you might for apricots. You didn't have to do other kind of things. And the market gave a much higher price for cherries. Okay, the Pavlinas had the same families come to help pick cherries every year. The Schaefers from Central Valley, and two Mexican families, Solarios, and the Alvarezes. The only migrant farm workers, according to Peter Pavlina, generally during this time period were Okies who came in. And he made a point of saying, they never said, can I have a job? The way they said it is, do you need an extra hand? It's just a different way of looking at it, but something that he remembered. And so that's one of those things that you would not get in a history book. You would only get from somebody remembering these people. And, he was a kid, so he's looking at the families and the kids coming in. Do you need an extra hand? And it goes in the times that the family did need help picking the cherries. They would get a fruit crate, and they put a sign, and they put it out out on the edge of the orchard, you know, cot cutters needed for the next 2 weeks or something like that. You know?
Mary Jo, excuse me, did you say that we own this, the Orchard Heritage Park, or that property?
You know, so I'm going through my notes, so I say everything accurately. It's unclear to me if it's Pavlina, Vidovich, or if they each had a piece of it.
It wasn't this Spalding.
That was before. And this is the other thing I wanted to say. Okay, this was a Steve Vidovich quote. We're coming up to Steve Vidovich. And Tickvick, I'll talk to you about them in a minute. But Steve Vidovich said, so the Calkins Spalding Ranch, 250 acres, this was it, right? He said, best orchard land in the state of California, maybe even the world. And then he said, all the people that bought a piece of it, which numbered 12 people in the 1940s, became millionaires.
12 people bought that 250 acres.
And did they buy it thinking they would become millionaires by real estate? No, they were farmers, right? And the war kind of transformed everything. But it's an interesting observation that he offers. The people that bought that land, 12 different entities, became millionaires by real estate. Okay, this is Lester Tickvicka. So I interviewed Ray Tickvicka, right? And Ray is very gregarious and so I'm at Ray's office. So here I am, you know, Miriam Stelling's bedside. Ray Tickvicka's office, somebody's office, living room, whatever, you know. It's just a very, Thursday Quant's living room. You go where somebody's willing to talk to you. And so Ray showed me a lot of pictures. Tickvicka's very, very proud of this beautiful cherry crop that they produced. And so Vidovich, Pavlina, Tickvicka, all Croatians. And so that, you know, what's going on that when Austria and Hungary are kind of gobbling up land and controlling Croatia, and Croatia is kind of hemorrhaging people, and so many people come here. So these, so all those people, Peter, Pavlina, Vidovich, Tickvicka, they're all their parents migrated, so they're the next generation. I'm looking at this box saying, how the heck did they do that? You know, like, how did they pack that? So Ray explained to me how they pack that. So you start with the box upside down. And the women put a first row of cherries, careful, 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 all stems up. Then they fill the rest of the box, just loose cherries, put the bottom on, and turn it over, and it looks like that. And it's a fancy pack. And it brings in a lot of money. And so I have this great conversation with Ray Tickvicka, and we're walking out of to the lobby of his office over there at Fremont and Danza Boulevard. And I see a framed, typed letter on the wall. And it's from Franklin Delano Roosevelt, saying thank you for the cherries. I'm like, okay, Ray, you know, you could have mentioned this in the interview, but you didn't. It's kind of a big deal when the president, he goes, well, my dad, you know, was so proud, and he loved FDR, and it's the Depression, and he sent him a fancy pack, and there's the letter back. My wife and I love the cherries. So, you know, so great. And so I took I made arrangements to have that letter copied, so that's in the exhibit outdoors. So but people forget, they forget that that's kind of a big deal. Yeah, and then he said, well, I sent a box to Ronald Reagan when he was governor. And I said, so the letter's not framed up with FDR? And he goes, oh, I couldn't put those two side by side. So this is just a cherry blossom here. Okay, this is the Vidovich family, and here's the disconnect, and this is my, 20 years later, 15 years later. This image is the Vidovich family of Mountain View, not the Vidovich family of Sunnyvale, and they are related, but I've completely lost how, and I didn't have it in my notes. Again, Croatia. And the drying apricots. So let me just see.